women are the most
Yeah,
important thing in our society.
for sure. That's why we have two dudes talking about women
Yeah.
right now.
Well, like my thing is, you can have one dude and 100 women, your society will survive. If you have 100 women, 100 men, and one woman, your society will fail. So that's just so like in terms of like our evolution, like what decided, what's more important is like it's women for sure.
But evolutionary speaking, yeah. But like culturally, have we actually valued women more?
I'd say so. Like
Like
we always say,
education. Oh, you finish my first.
well, like individually, you might say no, right? So like, hey, like women have all their just like they're all like repressed, right? Like, so like they have all these freedoms that they didn't used to have. So let's say freedom of movement, freedom of marriage choices, freedom of uh, voting rights, if like you want to put that in there, work, all these things, right? So like, and from my perspective, or like if we break it down, right, women also have a lot of benefits, right? And it's up to the society to decide if those benefits are fair, right? And you could say, hey, these benefits are no longer fair for women in exchange, right? And that's why you see society changes or why it progressed, right? But these advantages exist nonetheless. So women historically don't fight in wars. Like I'm sure everybody's heard of these things. Women don't fight in wars. It's whenever a crisis happens, emergency situation, women and children first, right? The Titanic, whatever. Um, and in general, uh, we as a society treat women as more precious. And what I mean by that is, if you just look at crimes, generally speaking, women get less punishment, right? For the same crime. Of course, there are extreme circumstances. So, like we're talking, you know, um, adultery and stuff. That's historically been unfair, but that's because of the rules that were set at the time, right? And I'm not saying that the rules set at the time were good or they were just or whatever, but you can sort of see how the necessity of the times sort of force the rules. So
But I think
before,
women are
yeah,
also more vulnerable as well, right?
back then,
Or even sometimes today, right? In like situations like divorce, right? Men have our position of money and power, right? In a marriage, and the woman would have more leniency in the divorce, right? They might get more money or have custody of the children
yeah,
and stuff like that, right? They'll generally the dude is shit out of luck, right? In the
yeah,
divorce.
okay, yeah. So that's like now we just listed like every mainstream take, right?
Mhm.
And I guess like the point that I reached with you before when we talked about this, and why we're talking about it now with the audience, is just that when we look at things historically, right? We shouldn't look at it from our point of view. We should look at it from like a historical point of view. So what that means is, so men have historically been quote unquote the oppressors, right? Like why? Right? Like when had men had more power? Why? Well, it's been the threat of physical violence. That's always been there, right? Has that threat sort of disappeared today? The answer is no. Okay, so like, is it right? If we look at it, if you want to look at it from like a gender perspective, whether it's matriarchy, patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, the archies, if you put it men versus women, men are still stronger than women. So like until women are as strong as a man physically, as intimidating as a man physically, then there will always be some sort of gender imbalance. And these gender balances will always continue to exist because women can't be as strong as a man. Although in our current society, we have this great equalizer called money, right? And,
And technology, I guess.
and technology, right? And you can say, hey, um, Well, a woman is just as good as a man, right? But then you can say, what is it? What's the common meme? It's like for every dollar makes the you pay the women like 90 cents. So you can say the women's right now is 90% men, right? In terms of physical violence. And what I mean by this is, look, if you had a full men army versus like if all the men in the world declared war on all the women on the world, right? The men would win. Like given equal technology, equal whatever, right? Men would just win. And that's a fact that people need to recognize, which is just the underlying sort of power imbalance has never changed. It's going into the women's favor more and more, but women still need protection by men from other men. Does that make sense? Like women can't be like, "Oh, let me get a band of the sisterhood and let's go beat up men." Like no, because if there's a brotherhood that's trying to beat up a sisterhood and there's no other brotherhood in the neighborhood to like stop the hood fighting, then then they'll just be the brotherhood, and then they'll go fight some other brotherhood for their sisterhood, which is how history has been, right? Like if
Mhm.
we go back to the time before technology, money, and all these things, it was just physical strength that determined the survival of the fittest, right? So in that sense, that's never changed, right? Unless you want to raise a bunch of docile men, right? Which is like one of the sort of maybe the direction we're headed, right? But when you have a bunch of docile men, all it takes is one group of non-docile men to defeat the docile men, right? Because you still need, right, you need your man to protect, right, to protect yourself from other men, right? And this sounds like super misogynistic, but the reasons I've sort of laid out is just like if you're walking down the street and there's a stranger, why should you feel safe if you're a woman, right? Like as a woman, like first of all, like like it is dangerous, like it is scary, right? The reason you feel safe is because society has imposed all these rules on men that gives you that freedom, right? So if you're in a society where there wasn't the rule of law, there wasn't all these things, right? And even if there are laws, they still get broken, right? And I don't want this to get tagged into like, oh well, like I dressed as a hoe, right? There's like this argument, like I dress like whatever, like you dress like a hoe, you deserve it. Like this has nothing to do with that, right? It's just the fact that if you walk down the street, like dark
The
alley,
power imbalance. I think you're just trying to get into the power
yeah,
imbalance,
the
right?
power imbalance, right? Like even as a man, right? Like you walk down an alley in this like dark neighborhood, right? And let's say you're not the physically most intimidating man and you're not armed, and you walked into this like sketchy neighborhood or something you're not familiar with, and you see this another more you know intimidating presence, right? It reminds me of the Mike Tyson joke, which is just like, you know
Everyone has a plan until they get punched in
I'd
the
say
face.
that's the most common one, but it's the other joke is like, you know you can call the police, but he's got 5 minutes till the police gets there, right? So at the end of the day, that's the issue. I think if you wanted to address sort of why women like are are in this quote unquote position of weakness, um and this it's unfair, right? uh that's the core issue, right? And from this unbalance we get all these things like why are women paid 90 cents on the dollar, which I agree is not fair, right? I don't think they should,
No,
right? And
would it be good for society to equalize this more, close this gap more? Like, that's what feminists and some allies would want,
so
right?
so here's the thing, we are closing this thing. So and we have been, right? If you look at women's rights, it's been increasing ever more as women take on more burden and as they fight for their privileges and they fight for their Well, people like to say they fight for their rights, but I believe nobody really fights for rights. It's you fight for privileges. We call it rights to make it sound more romantic, but inherently, all these rights are privileges. Um,
And responsibilities. I feel like sort of right.
well, yeah. So it's like, is it a right for you to have food, water, and shelter? It's not, right? It's a privilege. But nowadays, in our society, we can say, hey, yo, like, it's all right to like have that, right? Because of, the government, and if you're in the wild, in the wilderness, who you gonna? It's not a right. It's a privilege, right? You can't complain to somebody and they'll do that, right? And so it's a privilege bestowed upon you from the hard work of your ancestors, right? And the geolocation that you were born. Like if you were born, in the slums in Africa, right? Or the slums in India, or the slums in anywhere else that's not the Western world, Western developed nation, and you go there and say, hey, I have a right to all these things because the UN Charter says, I think you get slapped. Like, I think in their world, the people just won't give enough of a damn, right? Because they haven't developed the wealth.
So let's try to get back on track. So like women have been afforded a lot more like rights, such as like going to school and participating in the workforce and stuff like that, and even gaining political office.
Yeah.
They haven't broken the biggest glass ceiling of all, the president of the U.S. But I see
Soon.
that, yeah,
I
soon. Yeah, that's probably gonna happen soon. And but there's a lot of cost to society having women like do these things, right? It's not free, right? These women are postponing marriage in many cases.
Yeah.
That's but
I mean, we can talk about the symptoms of this, right? So, what happens when we do have a society of more quote unquote more free women? And you can say for better or for worse, right? Divorce rates have gone up a lot, and that results in lower marriages. We can then lower birth rate, and then there's a lot of things like that exacerbate it, right? We can point to technology, right? Social media, right? You can consumerism, right? That's bad capitalism, right? Right now, it's sort of, at least in the Western culture, it's how much money do you have, and that determines the ability or the worth of a man, right? So a woman would always want at least to be able to say that their man is somebody, right? It could be. I imagine no women is like, hey, like my man is a worthless chimp, right? It goes back to the reason is, hey, I want people to know that my man is dangerous, right? Like, if you want to, screw with me, you're gonna screw with my man, right? And he's not someone you can mess with easily, right? And if your society is so polarized in that sense, right? In terms of everyone's just respecting everyone on this like wealth level, right? Then that's what would happen, right? You would have a lot of women that want a few men, right? Like you have the and because the women themselves are more successful, right? So like they can't pick someone that's quote unquote less than them. So like that's something we as a society need to work out, right? Like, because nowadays you don't need as dangerous of a man, right? You don't need a millionaire to protect yourself, quote unquote, anymore, right? Would you be willing to marry a man who earns less than you? Would you be willing to marry a man that earns, you know, that has a lower prestige? And you ask these women, the answer is no, right? Like most of them would say no.
yeah, that would explain like all those dating apps, right? Like I think these stats like 20% make it 80% of the women, right?
Well, yeah,
I think
because
that reflects society in general, right? Like these most women want this unattainable group of men, right?
Well, I mean, you can say the same thing about men. Again, I don't
Okay.
want to make this like a sexist thing, right?
Uh-huh.
But the thing is, men are disposable. Like in
Oh, but,
our,
the reason I bring this up is because generally in our modern society, women choose the mate, right? They,
well,
at the end of the day, they choose the mate, right?
yeah, well, like we've sort of, there are still arranged marriages and things like that like force women. I'm not saying they don't exist. At least like in the Western developed society, I'd say like not as much. So then in that case, right, the women do choose, right? And there are edge cases. You can say like, what about abuse? What about uh, uh, forced slavery, right? Trafficking, all these things. These are results of like bad economics, right? So like if they're in a bad economic situation or they're just unfortunate, right? These right. But I'm talking about on average here, right? Most people, the women get to choose in the current situation. Right. So like, and I think women will get more powerful. Right? It's just like it's not instant. Like when you make sudden changes or drastic changes, yeah, society takes some time to work things out, and men and women need to both change. So like we do see now an increase in men being more domesticated, right? And I use this term loosely in the sense that, right, men are trying to be better fathers, right? Men do more of the chores, men do more cooking, right? Nowadays there's a rising standard for men, right? You have to uh, be well dressed now. There's more emphasis on all of that, right? But at the end of the day, there are still only three things that truly matter for a man, right? Like wealth, status, power, right? These typical competitive traits. And then there's like attractiveness, right? Which is like the universal trait. Um,
Mhm.
right, in terms of how you attract a mate. But yeah, the fame, right? Again, and like all of this because of like the pervasiveness of capitalism has been converted into like money, right? Like
But
right
this
now,
is not necessarily just a Western uh, or developed country issue, right? Necessarily, like we see this issue prevalent in many societies, even like theocracies like Iran, right? Birth rates are declining across and in Saudi Arabia as well, right?
yeah. So it is right, and that's why I think it's a more of a thing of women and men need to work out the changing role dynamics. So like before, right? Like as society, women have adjusted to sort of pick the best mate, right? Because you're not going to pick a loser, right? You try not to pick a the beggar on the street because your kids will be bad, right? It'll be bad. But now because of their whole like their rising value, the men need to be much better. But really, the men can be lower, right? But how does this how does the society justify that, or how does she justify that when the society doesn't? You
Hmm.
know, and
Why can't women just go like bypass the men altogether and just go start a family on their own with like
but it's a
sperm donation?
right. But then so like again, so like we say all this stuff, but like hey, let's take a step back here. Like let's talk about the pressures on men and women, right?
Mhm.
And then that we'll get back to your point, which is like okay, so first of all, like women, the pressure of being a woman or a girl is much greater than in my opinion, than it was maybe 200-300 years ago, right? So like before, you didn't get to make a lot of choices, right? But what you had to do was you had to keep like the traditional religious values, whatever it was, which is like purity and like uh attractiveness, right? Like they all had to be attractive, like that's always been women's primary weapon, or their primary signal to the outside world. And then that was sort of it, right? And obedient, I guess, right? and you
Mhm.
sort of trade off the, and in essence you're not exposed to the world, right? Because you are obedient. So the struggles of the real world are shielded from you in return, right? Sometimes, right? That's not fair, right? Because sometimes you have to take the abuse from your husband, right? If he's not considerate, and you're at the whimsical of the world, right? So now women have all of that, but they have more responsibility now. So for you to be respected as a woman, right, you have to be purity and all of that, and then you have education, right? Like now you have to be educated, right? Because if you're just a high school dropout, you're looked down upon in society, right? So the bar has gone up for women again, and like once you've gone up again, it's like, hey, well, before it became like let's get a good job, right? In the like post-war, post baby boom, like the 60s and 70s, it's like, hey, like the working woman is like now what it means to be
Socially acceptable.
socially acceptable as a woman, right? So like if you were a stay-at-home mom, right, and you didn't transition into the quote unquote modern woman, right, then you were left behind by society.
Or
And
oppressed.
well, like
Maybe
oppressed, I don't
no.
know if you're oppressed, because I consider a, and I think people are coming around to this now. It's like, hey, if you're a stay-at-home mom, it's a privilege. Like, hey, like right, right, like people, right, like if you have the ability to be a stay-at-home mom, like why wouldn't you? I don't understand, right? Like people are all right. People used to say like, oh man, like it sucks that she has to sacrifice her career and all of that. But if you ask any of these women who have the ability to do that, right, I believe the majority of them would tell you they would, and you can see in the statistics, which is just like very successful women, um they stop going, they stop pursuing their career after they have a kid. I don't think it's like, hey, like let me abandon my kid and like sacrifice time with my kid and like let me go pursue this like mega this like career to like not spend time with my kids. I like, if you're rich enough, I feel like that's irresponsible, right? Like it's like, right? So
Then should let's finish this point first. Like, don't should society even educate these women then? Because like they're not gonna return value back to society. I know this is gonna be a
wait, when you say return value, what do you mean?
like so we spend like dozens of years educating these women, nurturing them through school and through their careers, mentoring them, and once they have one baby or a couple of babies, they decide to drop out of the career and they're not returning quote unquote value back to
Well,
for
their
companies or
value is the
society.
baby.
But we spent so much money educating them and training them and mentoring them, right?
Okay, so
That
you're
that
well,
amount of
okay.
effort could be done for a lower class male, right?
Okay, so I guess, okay, let me just like make this more palatable for our audience if they like haven't clicked off and like give us a dislike and everything and like reported us yet. Which is what you're saying is like, hey, like they're using all of this public education system, and right, like we're pouring all this money, taxpayers are funding a lot of this, and you have like educated women and they want to work, right? So right now, like first we can get back to that point, and again, let me finish my point, which is like, hey, like women, they there's like this demand for them to become the successful women, right? Right. and and you can see this in Mad Men, which is just, you can see one of the characters, I think believe it was like the main advertiser's wife, she stays a stay-at-home mom and she gets left behind, right? So now it's like, hey, that's not enough, so you got to have like an elite education, you got to have a great job, and you got to be CEO. Like, what was that? Who's that like person that runs Facebook, man? Like
Sheryl Sandberg,
like
Lee
she
Man.
writes like some stupid ass book, right? Which is just like, you can have it all or whatever. Like, I have it all, right? Like, let's be the strong, independent boss woman, right? I can, I can. What was it, like elite education, CEO, work through things, and then I can pop out a few kids, and
And raise
then
them.
and raise them, and I can run like multiple businesses like at the top level, and I can um do all of this with no compromises and be super rich and have like a giga chat husband. It's just like, whoa, like, okay, maybe there's a few, but like, come on, man. Like, if you just get rid of the motherhood part of it, which is basically the women part of it, right? And the society pressure of being attractive, she's basically a very, very successful man. She would be the top 0.1% of men in the West. You know what I mean? Like a multi-millionaire, if not to like centimillionaire, CEO. So like how does she have more time and ability to outcompete the men and be a great mother? I like this is unbelievable, right? Like it's unfathomable, right? So like for me to question whether she's a good mom or whatever, or like maybe she hires somebody to take care of her kids and everything. All of these things, the only one I can truly believe is her kids. Like I wouldn't even trust like anyone who says she's a great mom or whether she says she's a great mom, right? And it'd be like, yo, like how does that work, right? Because like we know about absentee fathers, and like here you have like an absentee father plus an absentee mother, like combined into one, and like somehow she has it all, and it's just like okay, so like now that's
Benchmark.
the yeah, that's the benchmark sort of like goal for you to be like some successful women, right? So like women nowadays, right? What I'm getting at is they have all the pressures of traditional women that men don't face, like attractiveness, right? At least men didn't traditionally face, which is attractiveness, um, right? Purity or whatever, like being a good daughter, obedience, right? Listening to your parents, that type of thing. And then there's like the whole like all of the male aspect of it, like let's be competitive, let's like go out there and like start business or like climb the corporate ladder and all of that, right? So like you have this like homogenized role, and like that's the same thing that's happening for men too. So like now you have like you have to do all of that, and like right there's a growing percentage of like body dysmorphia, and then it's like okay, you have to domesticate men, so it's like they have to be a good father, right?
Hmm.
And right, and that's ultimately sort of this balance we need to strike, right? It's like what's the balance here? Because
What's the role of men and women?
yeah, like you can't have like someone who has it all. That's just not possible, right? Because like there's always someone else who's going to sacrifice one of these things to be better than you at one of these other things. Unless you're telling me you're some sort of super genius and your super genius makes up for it, which is probably what her book is trying to espouse, right? To get you to like worship her, right? Some sort of mega genius, but like no one's a mega genius. Like Isaac Newton couldn't have it all. So like what is this girl on, right? This isn't turned into some hate thing, but it's just like the amount of brainwashing, right? Even like Elon is like, yo, like, right? Like we know he's an absentee father. Like what? Like this guy has multiple kids, right? Like he's the right, like he's right.
Legitimate ones, and like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ones are
Like yeah, yeah,
illegitimate.
yeah, yeah. He's like sleeping with all these beautiful women. He's running multiple companies. He's super successful. Omega quote unquote big dick energy. But like come on, right, like he doesn't even claim to have it all. Well he might claim it, but like people aren't there to believe it. So it's just like why would you ever believe like any of these like quote unquote successful women that claim that they can have it all and have womanhood, and that's the thing we need to like address as a society, right? Like how much is the next generation worth?
Like, so let's go back to the other point. Like, should we put this pressure on women, right? Because we make these unrealistic goals and pursuits for these women.
Well, like I don't know if when you say we, you mean humanity as a self, or
The royal we, like, or like the yeah, society in general, like policymakers.
I don't know if it's policymakers. Like, so here's where I'm sort of confused, and I'm not sort of confused. I'm just not sure what the clear distinction is, right? So if we want to put it to like a cause, it's like, yeah, okay, well, educating women lets them get into the workforce, and that pays for more tax dollars. So you want to get more women to get educated, right? And then you want women to spend things, so you target their insecurities, so then they right give you they consumerism, right? This is where you consumerism and social media comes in, right? Exacerbates all of that, right? So like to get out of it, right? And all these things, they also tell you like what kind of man you need, right? Men face the same thing too, but men don't have the it's not as pressured on men because men are supposed to die. So like that's the unfortunate part. Like men are supposed to go to war and die. And they can or they can just be a monk. Like society, right? So society values the free labor, right?
Mhm.
Right? But as a woman, it's like, okay, well, like, like a few of you can be nuns, but like if all of you were nuns, we wouldn't be here today. So we can't have too many nuns, unfortunately. But like we can have a huge monk population. That's fine, right? Like we don't need that many married men, right? Right? Like a few men can have multiple wives. That's been, how society's worked in the past.
I think that's what we've done in the past, right? Most
Well, I
men
mean,
in the
you
past
can
didn't
see it now
procreate.
too,
Yeah,
right? Like in the billionaires do that, right? So it's not even like, hey, I'm pulling this out of some like misogynistic ass. It's just like, dude, what do you mean? You see it right now, right? Like
the Telegram dude and Elon.
yeah, Telegram dude has like 100 kids, right? Like all these people have been secretly having a fuck ton of kids, and that's how society's worked, right? So it's like the main discrepancy is just, women's status have changed. So it's like, yo, like what are you gonna do with this quote unquote newfound power, right? Like I think you ask any woman who's successful, right, in their mid 40s, mid 30s, you'd be like, yo, hey, if there was like your dream guy right now, he made enough money for you to like just chill at home, and then you can like not work and not deal with all this bullshit from work and like whatever your fucking clients, your things, and like this dude would just like take care of you, and like I bet like a majority, like over 50%, would say yes. Like I know this from anecdotal evidence, but like and it's just like, yo, come on. Like I would take that deal. Like that deal's just never offered to a man usually, right? Unless
Mhm.
it's like a much older woman, right? And the problem why most men are like don't take this is because men we're bred to die. Again, like we're supposed to go out there, fight in these wars, or hunt for the food, or try to get the thing, or go kill other men, right? Or we die trying.
So why isn't this offered to men? I feel like that would be a great stabilizing force, right? Like,
Well,
would the men just feel emasculated and then just not agree with it?
well, yeah, but then at some point, the woman loses respect for the men. So that's number one. Number two, it's from the man's angle. So like if you have a much older woman and a much younger man, at some point the man wants children,
Mm.
right? So they're forced to look at the younger woman, right? Like they'll eventually leave for a younger woman, right? So like for them it'll just be a period in their life, unless you say, hey, like there'll be the odd case, at least right now it's odd, right? Which is just like, hey, I don't want kids, right? Like we don't want kids, right? But even
Well, well,
yeah.
couldn't we like do like fertility stuff? So like
Oh yeah, so
help with
we're
these situations.
yeah, so now we're going back to, sorry, we took a huge detour, but we're going back to your like, hey, like let's go back to your thing of, oh, well, what about these women just use like IVF and like just to make kids on their own? But then it's like, yo, okay, so you have all of the pressures of that, of what I've just listed, which is a huge amount of work and responsibility and all these things that the woman has to tank, right?
Mm.
And you have to put it on top of that, a single parent, aka she has to take on the burden of fatherhood. Like, yo, are you kidding me, dude? Right? Like there are women that can do this, right? I'm not saying there's not women that are strong enough to do this or that it's like impossible, but I would argue that historically this has not been done because
It's also very expensive, right?
it's not very productive, right?
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
too
that.
much stress, and then probably the kid might not turn out right, and we know that from single parenting or divorced households. And you can argue whether but I'm pretty sure if you look at like the data on just single parent households sans divorce, which means without divorce, I still don't think they would be as well, because we've evolved to be first of all a nuclear family, and then a tribal system, like a tribe, right? Like and then we progress the tribe into societies, right? So like to scale it, remove all of it and just go from like individualism and society, that's not how it's supposed to work, right? And that's where you introduce a lot of, like it says, it's the as you don't know what you're missing till it's gone type thing,
Mm.
right?
So what about like normalizing like homosexuals and making babies then? Because I think it's Sam Altman recently I had a
Oh, yeah.
child as well.
Well, that's been normalized, right? Like almost like that's why I think like the statistic is that 1 in 10 or something is homosexuals, right? So
Or bi or whatever.
yeah, yeah. Well, like I don't know, right? But
Mhm.
like, I'm not here to challenge people's religious beliefs or whatever. But if we go with us, the common statistic, which is like some part of the population is homosexual, or they don't have a desire to reproduce, right? That can't, number one, that can't be the norm, because if that was the norm, we would have been extinct. So number two, they probably serve some sort of purpose in a tribal system, right? So like that's what I'm saying. Like in a tribal system, they probably took care of the, you know, they probably played some role, right? They
Mhm.
probably took care of the tribe in some way, and that's why that gene mutation or whatever you want to call it exists, right? Because if it didn't, it probably would have died out.
So, yeah, you mentioned biological clock.
Yeah,
What
that's the
about
biggest thing.
yeah, yeah. So we have like new technologies like CRISPR babies and surrogates. Can those be an alternative to like addressing some of these biological clock issues?
Okay, so like this is really funny, right? So like let's say, ready? So a woman works, right, studies really hard, gets this job that crushes her dreams, right, or maybe not, whatever, but like something that turns her into a man. Basically, she like has to slave, right? And then she slaves to her mid 30s. She's like, oh man, I sacrificed everything. Like no love life, nah, missed that boat. No kids, not miss that boat. So what am I gonna do? Oh, I'm gonna go buy extremely luxurious items. I'm gonna go on luxury trips. I'm gonna go get beauty products. To do what? All of these things are for what? To like relive her youth that she sacrificed. Okay. And then it's like, okay, now it's like, yo, let me do that with my kids as well. Let me go freeze my eggs or whatever. Right? And then it's like, oh yo, let me get someone else to have the baby. It's like, wait, like, aren't you just a man? Like at that point? And like, is it really worth you sacrificing all of that? Like, how many women are deluded into that they can do that? Do you get what I'm saying? Like the first of all, the technology is not there yet. So like when it's there, we can talk about where that future is, or like that's a separate conversation. But as of right now, do you see like how it's kind of like crazy? It's like you sacrificed. Why are you still maintaining your beauty for? It's like, oh, I maintain it to attract a mate. But okay, like you could have done that before.
So show me like
You,
society normalize early marriages. Like, shouldn't kids get married after college, immediately after college? I think that's basically what our parents did back in their time, right?
well, the problem with that is like we have this education component, right? So like now it's like, oh well, you have like, and it's pretty funny. It's like there's like Lee Kuan Yew, so it's a Singapore founding prime minister. He was talking to like this student at I think it's like Singapore Polytech, so a prestigious university, and she asked him like, hey, look, how would you solve the birth crisis? And he was like, okay, like women are having children later and later. He's like, what about you? Like, how old are you? And she's like, oh, I'm like 30 or like 29 or something. And he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm getting a PhD. And then and then he's like, do you have a boyfriend? She's like, no. Right? So so it's like oh, right. So like here's the other thing, right? Like yeah, you have like all these quote unquote accomplished women, right, who have like PhDs and double degrees and 5 degrees and 10 degrees, and they're super smart and they're doctors, and yes, we need them, okay, but for every one of those, there's gonna be 10 of those, I would argue, that are like, yo, this thing fucking sucks. I spent all this time. I spent like 20 years, 10 years of my life, 15 years of my life dedicated to this like stupid PhD. For what? And I mean, like, the course of your whole education, obviously not just like doing the PhD, right? And then it's like, because like how I know this, because like men don't even enjoy this. Like, right, like women want so much to be men, but like they don't realize, like, hey, men have it shitty sometimes. Right, like you do all this PhD, you do all this grunt work, and then it doesn't work out. And then it sucks. But what are you supposed to do with the men? Oh, dude, you're just a failure, dude. Go get drug addicted and die. Like that's your job. Go get alcoholism, right? Like don't go, right, go join the army, right? Like if we have some war, go fight some war, right? That's your purpose. You'll Right, and that's what men do, right? That's why you have like all these men that find purpose after joining the military and things like that. But for women, there's not that, right? Because the woman's purpose, right, for lack of a better word, is to care for her family, right? They're for majority, all right, because that's,
Evolutionary speaking,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
evolutionary speaking. Because if that wasn't the purpose, we wouldn't be here today. All right, that's my argument, right? I'm not saying, hey, like women can't explore and can't go out and do things, right? Like you can, and there are like women that don't want kids, right? But on average, from an evolutionary point of view, it's like, yo, like I think majority of people enjoy having family.
So what is the solution to this birth decline?
So I think it's a cultural shift, right? Like so I've been saying, how do you come to terms with this stuff, which is just like, first of all, the male female dynamic, right? Social respect, right? And then it's like, okay, consumerism, right? How do you need to sort of like dial that back, right? And I think the bluntest version, right? Let's go with the bluntest version, is like religion, right? Like, and we're seeing a rebound of that in Western society, right, or in America, right?
I
Christian,
think Gen Z is much more religious than millennials. I think.
right? Well, like we're seeing a rise in Christianity, right? Again, in religious things, like traditional values, etc. But even in non things, I think it'll take a few generations of women, because here's the thing, like once women realize, like hey, it's not good to be, it's not good to like become a corporate slave, essentially, to like feed your consumerism habits, right? Like men need to do that so that their women can have, a safe household, and a family, right? They need to go out there and be corporate slaves, or be whatever, right? But if you are a woman, why would you subject yourself to that? Right? And then we have women that are subjecting themselves to that. And you can say, oh, yo, it's freedom, lack of control. Yeah, but it comes at a price, right?
But wouldn't this? Yeah, I think this goes back to the power dynamic as well, right? There's a lot of men that abuse women and take advantage of that power dynamic because they earn the money in the relationship, right?
Yeah. So like you never want to give that up, but there's the degree, right? Because there's also just really, I don't want to, I'm not flaming people, but like there's just really greedy women out there, right? We're seeing, like, I'm not, right? Like there's like the P Diddy trials or whatever, and like you hear like that she's getting paid like $120,000 like monthly or yearly or whatever, right? Just getting abused, right? I mean, that's same as being a corporate slave, except the level of abuse is different, right? So it's just like, yo, is she worth $120,000? You know what I mean, right? So like we're always slaving, right? It's just like the level of punishment that you want to take versus the things you want to give away, right? And we have laws and society and moral things, and we say some things are respectful, right? Like it's okay for you to quote unquote work for another man, right? But he can't do this, right? Right, and that's to do with what we like as a society deem as, as okay, because and we see it now, a shift, right? Like now people accept OnlyFans a lot more. Before that used to be like, what the fuck,
Be shamed.
right? You'd be shamed in religious societies, in past societies, but now it's like, we've accepted like strong independent women type thing. So it's just like women have a right to earn bread, which I don't disagree with. But do they really need to go to that extent, right? And we've had prostitutions in the past, and sex has always been a thing. But is this just an evolution of that, or is this an argument for the class, like how do you say it, income inequality, right? That people are forced to turn into hoes, right? Men and women alike, right? And then there's the capitalism culture of it, right? It's like for you to be a woman now, you also have to you know be attractive, be all these things, right? Be successful, right? It's just, dude. I feel really bad for women. Like I feel like as a woman, it's a lot harder because you have to compete with all the men before you just compete with other women, which is just like, yo, how do I be more attractive, right? Or how do I have a better family, or etc. Right? All these other things, which they still compete with. But now it's like, maybe like one woman had an outing, which was just like, yo, okay, like now I also work and like, right? It's always like, hey, like I got a job now, so I can like leave this abusive man. But like men also need to catch up too. So like you need better quality men. So like that takes generations to replace, right? So like you have like really demanding women and low quality men, right? As time goes on, we assume some sort of equilibrium will happen because the kids that remain, right, you'll teach the boys to become better men, or like the men that the society
The more desirable.
deemed more desirable. Exactly. So like your kid, right, as a boy, quote unquote, will no longer be like a savage that just goes out and just fucking punches kids and like beats up other people, right? That's because that's not deemable anymore, right? Now we say, hey, you got to be educated, you got to be civilized, right? And now you got to be more domesticated, right? You got to be more well groomed, right? You got to should be more empathetic, sympathetic, right?
Do you think we'll reach that equilibrium before societal collapse?
Oh, that's right. So that's a byproduct of like hyper financialization,
Mm.
right? Like, and then that's a topic we can just discuss, but like that's why I think at the end of the day, it's like income inequality is I think the biggest driver behind all of this, right? Like we can say, oh, it's 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 these things, but right, like I remember at work, like one woman tells me, hey, like I hired her. She's a girl. She's a woman. She's in her 30s, single, unmarried. Okay, middle manager. I was middle manager too. She hires a new worker, and she comes in and she gets pregnant, paternity leave, right? And I was like, and she's getting all the benefits. And she was saying, I was like, man, good for that girl. Go get her. Go get it. Go get that bread. And it's
Yeah.
funny because right after she comes back, like she gets like a year or like a 1 year maternity leave or whatever, right? Or 2 years. I don't know what it was. She comes back, second kid. So like the whole time I was there, I never saw her. Like I worked there for like 2-3 years. I never saw her. She came in like before me, apparently. I never saw her. I was like, what? Like I've never met this person. She's like, yeah, and I was sort of celebrating her, right? But she was like, no, man, you gotta think. That's so bad for all the other women, right? Like now that's why these companies won't hire women, right? But that's something we need to work out as a society too, right? Like what's wrong with, like, why do women need to be productive? You see what I'm saying? Like this is it's kind of crazy, right? Like
But
women.
who bears that cost, right? The opportunity cost of
No,
the labor
but
gap,
it's not.
right?
No, no. Well, no. I'm saying like society used to be like, hey, like we as a society,
Hmm.
right, said that women don't need to work. Now we as a society say that women need to work. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's a
Right.
very different from women want to work. Okay, so like before it used to be like, hey, women, if they want to, they should be able to work. But it's changed to now we as a society say, hey, women, you need a job, right? So like that privilege that women used to have got bamboozled away by whatever. I'm not blaming I'm not blaming if it's the feminists or it's the corporate elitists or whoever it is that's like exploit. Maybe it's the government, heck, for like tax dollars, or like exploiting women, right? But like women used to have this exorbitant privilege, which is just like we as a society respected you and didn't need you to work, right? And like as a society, we've gotten poorer, right? Which is crazy, right? You can say it's crazy. We've gotten poorer because now women need to work, and you don't feel any better, do you? No.
Your quality of life is
Yeah, your
worse.
quality of life is worse, right? You can't afford that house, bro. What happened before? It used to be, yo, think about it, right? If I have a work and my woman works, yo, twice the income, we get a bigger house. We can have kids earlier. We can do all these things, right? Better vacations. What do you get it now? A tiny apartment and a hat and a cat, right? Men and women alike, right? Men just dirtier apartment. Shots fired. But it's like yo, like, right? And we're seeing this thing where it's breaking down, where we're seeing women becoming more like men, where women are also less clean, right? They're right. There's this like culture that celebrates quote unquote degenerate women, right?
Mm.
Like we used to, like now that we celebrate degenerate men as long as they make money, right? But that's like this is it's like kind of twisted, right? Like like what the fuck happened? Like what was like the biggest bamboozle, right? Like this big, like this is reminds me of like this reminds me of like the freedom con. Like they tell you it's freedom, next thing you know, you're a slave. You're like some corporate slave. Like enjoy your freedom, bro. But yeah, you do get freedom, but you're trapped. It's just a different type of trap.
All right. Let's just leave it at that.
Let's not get canceled.